This video contains minor spoilers for Hi-Fi Rush, mainly concerning scenes from the credits. The plotline of Hi-Fi Rush is not one that features massive plot twists that, if spoiled, ruin the experience, so if you plan to play Hi-Fi Rush and want to enjoy the story, this will not spoil you too much, and you will still be able to have a good time. But if you want to go in completely blind, come back once you finish the game. So, getting straight into it, there are scenes at the end of Hi-Fi Rush that hint at potential queerness and attraction between the two main female characters, Peppermint and Korsica. And, of course, like any hints at gayness in media that are not explicitly confirmed, this has led to debate amongst fans. Now, I loved Hi-Fi Rush, and discussing this is my excuse to talk about a game I thoroughly enjoyed from a perspective that I'm interested in. The best way to approach this is to look at the evidence for queerness with Peppermint and Korsica and then consider the counter evidence, then assess and compare and hopefully come to a conclusion. Part of the reason why I've seen disagreement around this pairing is that most of the evidence for it is very late in the game, in fact 2/3 are in the credits. The first scene in the credits shows Korsica entering the back of a pickup truck with Peppermint already in the back, and when Korsica gets in, she winks at Peppermint, leading to Peppermint returning a blushing smile. The second scene is later on in the credits, a bit easier to miss but definitely intentional. Right before Chai drops into the same pickup truck from the first scene, we see Korsica and Peppermint standing next to each other. Peppermint starts to blush a little again as she is about to cozy up to Korsica, but not before Chai drops down in between the two, interrupting the moment. To me, this mirrors a classic rom-com trope of the main couple never being able to get a moment to themselves without interruption. That's a case of opinion, however, Hi-Fi Rush is not above cliched but enjoyable storytelling of this style. Now, the only piece of evidence outside of the credits is dialogue from the 8th track, or level of the game, and it takes place right after Chai summons Korsica for the first time. Now, this summoning is only possible because of Peppermint's technological skills, so Korsica compliments her, leading to Peppermint getting embarrassed, and then Cinnamon comments that Peppermint is blushing. These are the main pieces of evidence that we see throughout the story of Hi-Fi Rush. It may seem limited, but there are some caveats to this. Firstly, these are both side characters, so the interactions we see between them are limited. Most of the interactions we see in game are between Chai and another character, since we're playing from his perspective. So if you're looking for moments between two characters who are not Chai, especially if Chai isn't physically present, then there is not that much to see. So the fact that so many of the limited moments we see between Peppermint and Korsica are presented this way can be seen as a wider implication of how we should interpret their relationship. Off the top of my head, we do not see much else between Korsica and Peppermint throughout the narrative, so these brief moments, especially in the credits where the only screen time is pretty limited, feels very intentional. And then the inverse of this is also true, in the sense that we see a lot of interactions between Chai and Korsica and Chai and Peppermint, since, as I said, we're playing from his perspective. A romance with Chai is one of the most common explanations against pairing Korsica and Peppermint, and I'll go more in depth on this in the counter evidence. But the romantic tension we see between Chai and Peppermint or Chai and Korsica is limited. Of course that depends on your opinion and your perspective, but we'll save that for the next section. Now, the final piece of more subtextual evidence for Peppermint and Korsica is that hints of it were left at the end. This may be interpreted by some as evidence of it being tacked on and forced diversity, but those who are more accustomed to situations like this are aware of why this is usually done. If there was explicit hinting at a romance between Peppermint and Korsica throughout Hi-Fi Rush, it would have been a lot harder to ignore. This would have alienated a lot of players who see queerness in their games as forced diversity. This can be seen in the romantic relationships between Cora and Asami, or Princess Bubblegum and Marceline only being confirmed in the very last episode of their respective series. Or if you want a gaming example, Ellie from The Last of Us only being portrayed as queer in DLC. It's been proven repeatedly that you have to save canonical queerness, especially between important characters, until the end. Otherwise, your media will be labelled as a gay show or a gay game, and publishers often don't want to be stuck with this niche, even if they do want to represent queerness in their media. This is why I think there is only one light hint towards anything between Peppermint and Korsica within Hi-Fi Rush, and then only including more in the literal last moments of the game. So while some players might have seen the potential romance being pushed to the end as evidence against a relationship, it is potentially more likely to be evidence for it, based on the precedent set for queer couples in the media. Now, while most of the evidence for the potential romance between Peppermint and Korsica is shown in the game, in a strange twist from the norm, most of the evidence against a queer relationship is subtextual. Because of the subtextual nature, some of this is less counter-evidence and more counter-arguments, due to them being occasionally more subjective. This is worth pointing out. However, this also means that there are quite a few different approaches you can take. I think the main counter evidence I've seen is that some people think it is one-sided, and that while Peppermint might be attracted to Korsica, there is a chance her affection is not reciprocated. And there's quite a bit of validity to this, especially considering that Peppermint is the one to scooch to Korsica and Peppermint blushes at Korsica's comment. Now, the only counter evidence to this is that Korsica is the one to wink at Peppermint, and while a wink can often have romantic connotations, this is also not exclusive, but again, who knows. There does seem to be some imbalance, but of course, with the interactions we see between the two being so limited, it is hard to surmise the implications of just one wink. And as mentioned in the last section, you can also disprove one ship with another, and from what I've seen, there is a significant portion of people who prefer the pairing of Chai and Peppermint especially. Logically, this makes sense since we see them interact from the start of the game and their relationship develops over the course of the 12 tracks. Of course, there is a question of whether this develops into a romance or more of a platonic bond, as well as potentially being disproven by endgame blushing, but that's neither here nor there. And of course there's also the other countership of Chai and Korsica, but this is significantly less popular. However, Chai catches and saves Korsica after their fight, and they do have opposite personalities, both of which can be used as romantic tropes. However, this potential romance also seems to stagnate after a while. Returning to Korsica and Peppermint as a pairing, another piece of counter evidence I've come across is the age difference between the two. Peppermint is 23 and Korsica is 32, giving them a 9-year age difference. While this is of course a little atypical, it isn't unheard of. They are of course both adults, but even with the age difference, situations like this can get messy, with those in favour and against often having pretty passionate opinions. But in the case of Korsica and Peppermint, I don't think pairing them is wrong by any means. Now, there is one piece of counter evidence I've seen that I strongly disagree with. This is that since the game is developed by Tango Gameworks, a studio based in Japan, and since Japan is less progressive with queer rights and representation compared to some Western countries, some people assume that they would not represent a queer couple in their games. Now, I could rant about this misunderstanding for a while, but instead I'm just going to say that the preconception that people in countries less friendly to queer people are less likely to be queer, and that because of this queerness cannot be derived from media from these countries, is reductive to say the least. Aside from this, most of the other takes I have seen against Korsica and Peppermint have been more opinion based than based on any content in the game. But unless there's some other evidence for a relationship between Chai and Peppermint or Chai and Korsica that I've missed, then I think I've covered most of the counter evidence. Now, I can't help but find the role reversal in this situation pretty funny, because if either of the genders are switched, I doubt there would be any question over whether there was implied romantic tension between Korsica and Peppermint. I think when it comes to picking up on queer context, those who are looking for it are so used to being told that they are stretching, and even when it's slapping you in the face, you still feel like you need to second guess. And also, this is just personal opinion, but I feel like if the developers wanted to have a romance between Chai and Korsica or Chai and Peppermint, they just would have. With a relationship like that, there would be no reason to hide it behind any subtext. But with how Hi-Fi Rush ended, I don't think these are relationships they are setting up any foundations for. Also, an interpretation of the characters, which I've seen a lot of fans of the game suggest, is that the relationship between Chai and Peppermint is much more likely to be that of surrogate siblings. Chai and Kale are clear opposites, so seeing Chai grow to fulfill that role Kale could never for Peppermint is a lot more satisfying than a standard romance. Now, looking at the evidence we have presented, and taking into account how easy it would have been to include a romance between Chai and Korsica or Chai and Peppermint, I think the insight we've had into the relationship between Korsica and Peppermint is a lot more indicative of romantic tension. Now, of course, there is still ambiguity surrounding how mutual this attraction is, but even if it is one-sided, including queerness as a part of Peppermint's character is at least good representation for a main figure in a game. But also, Korsica did wink at her, so who knows. However you choose to interpret the credits of Hi-Fi Rush, it's hard to disagree that if Tango Gameworks choose to work on a sequel, there are interesting possibilities for developing not just Peppermint and Korsica, but the rest of the main cast as well. I expected that I would love the gameplay and the looks of Hi-Fi Rush, but I didn't predict just how much I would enjoy the characters. So, only giving them one game would really be a waste. 1, 2, 3. If you've made it so far, thank you for sticking about, but if you have played Hi-Fi Rush and you have any strong opinions on the ending, especially if you disagree with me or you agree with me, I really want to hear what other people have to say, because I know there are strong opinions on either side, and of course I have a clear bias, but yeah, whatever you have to say, I really want to hear it. But if you enjoyed hearing me talk about games, I've got a couple of videos about Bayonetta and the controversy surrounding the series, which I'm really happy with. But if you want something a bit more casual, then there's my ranking of the games which I played last year, which I'm still really happy with. But if you want to hear something more focused on queer subtext like this one was, I have a very long video about queer subtext in JoJo, which I'm also still pretty happy with. Or if you want something shorter, a bit like this, I got one about Tiger and Bunny as well. That's enough of me hawking my wares, but if you like this type of video, subscribing to stay around would be amazing. I had a bit of help with this one as well. Annie helped me go over the script. It was a lot shorter this time, so that was refreshing for it to not take as long to go over. Seb helped me with the thumbnail, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Jay helped me go over the video and work out any issues I had with it, as well as Sauron Art. He helped me with it as well, and he's now posting on YouTube again, so go check him out if you want to see some really good art content. But yeah, I've been on a bit of a gay kick recently, honestly. I've been talking about queerness in the Bayonetta video, I just posted a Tiger and Bunny video before that, and after this I'm posting a video about queerness in the Fire Emblem series. This isn't everything I'm going to do forever, but yeah, if you care about the Fire Emblem series, look forward to that video coming out in a couple of weeks hopefully. I was thinking this video is quite self-indulgent already, but if I wanted to make a properly self-indulgent video about Hi-Fi Rush, then I would have just talked about how obsessed I am with Kale and how he's just gay and misunderstood, but that would be a much longer video probably actually. But yeah, no, I'm so upset with what happened to Kale at the end of the game because it's kind of closed doors to future development, but that's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, no, who knows, and the sequel's nowhere near being confirmed. But again, if you have any strong opinions on this topic, please comment, because I'm sure either if you just have a countering opinion, or if you think there's something I missed, or if you agree with me, I'm sure someone will. But yeah, no, let me know, and thanks for sticking about.